Sydney Sweeney, the actress known for her, let's call it physical commitment, mostly mediocre acting and undeniable star power. What about her? From the guarded romantic caught between pride and vulnerability to the reluctant future hero pulled into something bigger than herself. And from the survivor navigating a world of wealth, manipulation and hidden danger to the emotionally fragile young woman who confuses love with validation, constantly reshaping herself to be wanted. Let's get into it! Please help your favorite average movie guy get to 1,000 subscribers by subscribing right now. Early work in the shadows. The Ward, 2010. After starring in Zombies of Mass Destruction, Heroes, and Criminal Minds, Sydney Sweeney began in a place many careers quietly do, on the edges of someone else's story. Directed by horror master John Carpenter, the film follows a young woman institutionalized in a psychiatric hospital where the line between reality and nightmare begins to dissolve. Sweeney appears in a very small supporting role as young Alice, one that could easily be overlooked and thus also was. For Sweeney, it is nothing more than a small glimpse into big-budget filmmaking, and for us as an audience, it now is a cool blink and you'll miss it appearance. This wasn't a breakout role, it wasn't meant to be, but it was a beginning, an introduction to the industry. The Handmaid Tale, 2018. After 8 slow years of working on her career, with roles in 90210, Grey's Anatomy, The Middle, Pretty Little Liars, Everything Sucks, Along Came the Devil, and Under the Silver Lake, among many more, Sydney Sweeney finally began stepping into projects that carried real cultural weight. Set in the dystopian regime of Gilead, where women are stripped of their rights and reduced to roles assigned by the state, Sweeney appeared in Season 2 as Eden Spencer, a pious and obedient girl to that regime. Her role isn't one of the central figures, but it doesn't need to be. Like many of the show's supporting characters, she represents something larger than herself, a fragment of a broken system. What stands out is how naturally she fits into that environment. There's a restraint to her performance, a quiet understanding of tone. She doesn't push for attention or dramatics. Critically, The Handmaid's Tale was already a phenomenon by this point, praised for its performances, direction, and chilling relevance. For Sweeney, this still wasn't a true breakout moment, but it was a step into something bigger, a shift from background roles to prestige television, from simply appearing to participating in stories that mattered.
Love is patient. Love is kind.
Garnering attention on television. Sharp Objects, 2018. That same year, Sydney Sweeney again notably appeared on television. The series follows a journalist returning to her hometown to investigate a series of brutal murders, but the real story lies beneath the surface. Generational trauma, self-destruction, and the quiet violence people carry within themselves. Sweeney plays Alice, a fellow patient in a psychiatric facility who forms a fragile, deeply intimate bond with Amy Adams' character. It's a role built almost entirely in emotional proximity, soft conversations, shared pain, and the unspoken understanding between two people trying to survive themselves. And to be honest, this is where you start to see both her strength and her limitations as an actress. There's a rawness to her performance that works in the show's favor. She feels genuinely vulnerable. But at times, that vulnerability borders on passivity. In a series filled with intensely layered performances, it can feel like she's reacting more than shaping the moment. But still, her talents were clear. Critically, the series was widely acclaimed, praised for its atmosphere, direction, and powerhouse performances. The supporting roles like Sweeney's helped build the emotional foundation of the story. For her career, Sharp Objects was a quiet but important step. Still not a breakout, not a scene stealer, but a role that again placed her within prestige storytelling.
Maybe when I'm older like you.
Euphoria, Season 1, 2019. After starring in Big Time Adolescence and Clementine, every actor has a role that changes the trajectory of their career, and for Sydney Sweeney, that role was Cassie Howard. This show arrived as something different, stylized, chaotic, and emotionally unfiltered. Created by Sam Levinson and led by Zendaya, the series explores addiction, identity, and the fragile psychology of modern adolescence. Sweeney's character Cassie on paper could have easily been reduced to a cliché, the popular girl with an infamous sexual history whose story revolves around relationships and validation. And early in the season, that's almost how she's framed, but as the episodes unfold, something more complicated begins to emerge. Sweeney leans heavily into Cassie's emotional vulnerability. There's a constant sense that she's trying to be what others want her to be, shaping herself around attention, affection, and approval. It's a performance built on exposure, both emotionally and physically, and to her credit, she commits to that fully. And honestly, that commitment, mostly physical, is what made her stand out even more. She has some of the most talked about nude scenes, probably of all time, and it would be dumb to say that didn't play a role in her rise to stardom here. But this is also where a bit of criticism comes in. She might lean a bit too much on this with her performance. In quieter moments, Sweeney shows a much stronger sense of internal acting. Those are the scenes where you see the potential. Critically, Euphoria became a cultural phenomenon. It sparked conversation, controversy, and massive viewership. While much of the spotlight went to Zendaya, the supporting cast including Sweeney benefited from the show's visibility. It wasn't perfect, but Euphoria definitely introduced Sweeney to a global audience in many ways.
I just think the Molly's like way too strong or something.
Awards recognition. The White Lotus 2021. After starring in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Nocturne, and Downfall High, Sydney Sweeney made a sharp and very deliberate shift. This show is very different. It is quiet, observational, almost surgical in how it dissects wealth, privilege, and the subtle cruelty that exists beneath polished surfaces. Sweeney plays Olivia Mosbacher, a wealthy, hyper-aware college student vacationing with her family. Olivia is intelligent, cynical, and emotionally detached, a character who spends more time analyzing others than revealing anything about herself. Her performance here is far more controlled. The emotions aren't worn on the surface, they're buried. Olivia doesn't break down, doesn't unravel, instead she observes, judges, and occasionally manipulates, but that restraint is a double-edged sword. Critically, The White Lotus was a massive success, praised for its writing, performances, and sharp social commentary. And Sweeney's performance was widely hailed as one of her best, even earning her an Emmy nomination for Outstanding Supporting Actress in a Limited or Anthology Series or Movie. For Sweeney, The White Lotus was less about standing out and more about proving control.
Fine, he's being himself, gaming and fapping and buys.
The Voyeurs 2021. Next, Sydney Sweeney got her most notable leading role in film to date. The film follows a young couple who become obsessed with watching their neighbors, turning casual curiosity into something far more invasive. What starts as harmless fascination slowly spirals into manipulation, desire, and consequence. At the center of it all is Sweeney, who carries the film as Pippa, one half of the couple, a character whose morality shifts as quickly as her curiosity grows. Sweeney fully commits to the film's tone. She leans into the voyeuristic tension, and her physical commitment is clearly on screen again. There's a clear effort to chart a transformation from passive observer to active participant, but the execution doesn't always land. Sweeney's performance can feel uneven, strong in isolated moments but less cohesive across the full arc. There are scenes where she taps into something compelling, especially when the film slows down and lets her internal conflict breathe. But in more heightened moments, the performance occasionally feels like it's chasing the film's twists rather than grounding them. Critically, The Voyeurs received mixed to negative reviews. Some appreciated its boldness and throwback thriller energy, while others criticized its writing and tonal inconsistency. For Sweeney though, The Voyeurs still serves a purpose. It shows a willingness to take risks. Even if the result isn't entirely successful, the ambition is clear.
Can we be rebellious before we have kids?
Euphoria Season 2, 2022. After starring in Night Teeth and Robot Chicken, Sydney Sweeney returned as Cassie Howard, stepping into a version of the character that is far more unstable, far more obsessive, and far more central to the chaos of Euphoria. The season pushes Cassie into a storyline built on secrecy, desire, and emotional dependency as her need for validation spirals into something almost self-destructive. It's louder, messier, and far less restrained than anything the character went through before. And this time, Sweeney rises to it. Where her Season 1 performance occasionally felt repetitive, here it feels fully realized. She leans into the extremity of Cassie's emotions, and instead of letting it become overwhelming, she shapes it into something intentional. There's a heightened quality to the performance, and maybe a needed decrease in physical commitment and nudity. Her more intense scenes became some of the most talked about moments of the season. While the season itself divided audiences more than the first, Sweeney's portrayal of Cassie was constantly highlighted as one of the standout elements. She even earned her second major awards recognition with an Emmy nomination for Outstanding Supporting Actress in a Drama Series. This wasn't just a supporting role anymore, this was a performance people were discussing, debating, even arguing about.
You guys can all judge me if you want, but I do not care. I have never, ever been happier.
Reality 2023. Next, Sydney Sweeney made a move that almost feels like a direct response. Strip everything back, remove the spectacle, and rely on nothing but performance. The film is about as minimal as a film can get. Based on real FBI transcripts, it follows the interrogation of reality winner, unfolding almost entirely in real time. There are no dramatic monologues, no stylized sequences, just conversation, tension, and silence, and that's exactly what makes it such a risk. Because in a film like this, there's nowhere to hide. Every pause, every shift in tone, every flicker of discomfort has to come from the actor. This is where Sweeney proves something important: restraint. Critically, the film was well received, with many calling it one of her strongest and most mature roles to date. Her performance is deliberately controlled, almost understated to the point where it might not register immediately, and for the most part it works remarkably well. For Sweeney, reality is a turning point. It's the moment where she proves she doesn't need intensity, controversy, or spectacle to hold attention. She can do it with stillness as well.
No, and I don't want to make any assumptions or anything like that. Just
Becoming a household name. Anyone But You, 2023. After starring in Americana, Sydney Sweeney made another sharp turn, this time into something far more traditional and in many ways far more difficult than it looks: the modern rom-com. The film follows two people who can't stand each other until a wedding forces them back into each other's lives, where tension slowly turns into attraction. It's a familiar setup, one built on chemistry, timing and charm rather than intensity or psychological depth. And that's exactly where the challenge lies. Rom-coms live or die on their leads, and for Sweeney, this is one of the first times her natural screen presence is tested in a lighter, more audience-friendly way. The result is surprisingly effective. She brings a different energy here, more relaxed, more playful, less guarded. There's a clear effort to tap into comedic timing, especially in dialogue-driven scenes, and while she doesn't completely reinvent the genre, she fits into it comfortably. At times, her performance can feel slightly uneven, particularly when balancing comedy with sincerity. Opposite the clearly stronger Glenn Powell, some of her acting flaws become apparent, but when the chemistry clicks, it really clicks. The dynamic between the leads carries the film, and it's exactly why you keep watching. Commercially, Anyone But You was a success, performing strongly at the box office, grossing over $220 million worldwide. Something that not all modern rom-coms manage to do. For Sweeney, it was a breakout with general movie-going audiences. And thus, Anyone But You is about accessibility. It may not be her most complex performance, but it's an important one in that regard.
I hated you. I didn't really give you a choice.
Madam Web, 2024. Next, Sydney Sweeney stepped into something much bigger, her first real entry into franchise filmmaking. The film is set within Sony's now cancelled Spider-Man universe, following a paramedic who develops psychic abilities that allow her to see into the future. The story brings together a group of young women whose lives are connected in ways they don't yet understand, with Sweeney playing Julia Cornwall, one of the key figures tied to that future. It's the kind of project that often signals a transition from rising talent to mainstream star, but the execution tells a more complicated story. Sweeney's performance here is noticeably more restrained, not in the intentional controlled way, but in a way that feels limited by the material. Julia as a character isn't given much room to develop, and because of that, Sweeney doesn't have much to work with, even though her awful performance in itself doesn't help either. Compared to her more character-driven performances, this feels like a step back in terms of depth. Critically, the film was widely panned, with much of the criticism aimed at its writing and overall execution. It quickly gained a reputation as one of the worst films of the decade, and I can't help but agree, it is absolutely awful. Commercially, it also disappointed, only grossing just over $100 million worldwide. For Sweeney's career though, Madam Web isn't really about the result, it's about expansion. Even if the film itself doesn't fully work, it places her in a different category of actress, one who can move between smaller, performance-driven projects and large-scale productions, even the bad ones.
Cassie, please help us.
Immaculate, 2024. Next, Sydney Sweeney made a move that feels far more intentional, returning to horror, a genre that helped build her early career, but this time on her own terms. The film follows Cecilia, a young woman who travels to a secluded convent in Italy drawn by faith and the promise of a new beginning. But what starts as devotion slowly turns into something far more disturbing. From the beginning, the role plays directly into Sweeney's strengths. Cecilia is built on vulnerability. She's isolated, uncertain, trying to hold on to belief in a place that increasingly gives her reasons not to. And in those early moments, Sweeney is at her most natural, quiet, restrained, letting small expressions carry the performance rather than forcing emotion. As the film progresses, Cecilia is pushed further and further, and Sweeney has to expand with it. The performance becomes more physical, more intense, moving from internal conflict to something much more outward and confrontational, and for the most part, she handles that transition well. Critically, the film received a mixed response, praised for its atmosphere and Sweeney's central performance, but often criticized for relying on familiar horror conventions. Commercially, it performed strong, grossing over $34 million worldwide. For Sweeney though, Immaculate represents something more important than just another role. After years of working within other people's visions, this feels like a step towards defining her own.
I must have drank too much wine and embarrassed myself in front of Mother Superior.
Christy, 2025. After starring in Eden and Echo Valley, this film asks for something completely different. The film tells a true story of Christy Martin, charting her rise in the 1990s as one of the most recognizable figures in women's boxing before shifting into something much darker. Her relationship with her coach-turned-husband and the attempted murder that nearly ended her life. It's a role built on transformation, literally. She is very much unrecognizable and not able to bank on her looks. Sweeney steps into the ring, literally portraying Martin across multiple stages of her life. She brings a grounded determination to the role. There's a toughness here that feels different from her previous performances, not just in appearance but in energy. As the film shifts away from boxing and into Martin's personal life, it demands something much more complex. The strength becomes vulnerability, the control starts to fracture, and the story turns from triumph to survival. And this is where Sweeney has to balance two sides of the same character. For the most part, she succeeds. In the more intimate scenes, Sweeney delivers some of her strongest work. Critically, Christy itself wasn't hailed, but it was seen as a compelling showcase for Sweeney's transformative performance. Commercially, it performed atrociously, earning only around $2.3 million worldwide and having one of the worst openings and worst second weekend in wide release history, showing that Sweeney might have to bank on her looks more than she would like to when it comes to audience attention. For Sweeney, this was clearly something new and not bad at all, but sadly not many people saw it.
You're gonna be so ugly that not even your girlfriend's gonna recognize you.
The Housemaid 2025. Next, Sydney Sweeney stepped into something far more overtly commercial but also far more unpredictable. The film follows Millie Calloway, a young woman with a troubled past who takes a job as a live-in maid for a wealthy family, hoping for a fresh start, but the house she enters isn't what it seems. From the beginning, the role plays with duality. Millie is both vulnerable and deceptive, someone trying to rebuild her life but also hiding parts of herself. And Sweeney leans into that ambiguity. There's a calculated softness to her performance early on. For the first half of the film, this works really well. She builds tension through restraint, keeping the audience slightly unsure of who Millie really is. But as the film progresses, things become more heightened. The story leans heavily into twists, psychological turns, and increasingly extreme situations. And while Sweeney commits to it, the performance doesn't always fully anchor those shifts, but to me, her performance here was far above some of her other very mediocre work. Critically, the film received generally positive reviews and became a major commercial success, grossing over $396 million worldwide and even leading to a sequel being greenlit already. For Sweeney, this is a significant step, not necessarily because it's her most complex performance, but because it again places her firmly at the center of a mainstream hit. It is not a perfect performance, and while it is fine, it doesn't need to be, because what it proves is something else entirely, that she can lead a film people actually show up to see.
I know you think that I can do better, but I need this job.
Euphoria Season 3, 2026. Next, we arrive at what might be the most anticipated chapter in Sydney Sweeney's career so far. For the first time, the series makes a major shift. The story jumps several years into the future, moving beyond high school and into early adulthood. Cassie in particular is placed in a completely new position. She is now in a complex, married relationship with Nate, working as a digital content creator and navigating the consequences of her past actions. And that setup alone changes the performance, because the question is no longer who is Cassie, it's who is she trying to be now. Cassie has been said to be even worse or crazier in the new season. The character's journey is described as a self-discovery ride, keeping her on her toes, which for Sweeney is an interesting challenge. In earlier seasons, her strength came from emotional intensity, but here, the performance seems to require the opposite: suppression, image management, and kind of controlled stability. And whether that fully works will depend on execution. This isn't just a supporting arc anymore. Cassie's storyline looks to be one of the central threads of the season. So Season 3 isn't just about continuing a character, it's about proving evolution, showing that both Cassie and Sweeney can grow beyond what made them stand out in the first place. And if it works, it might not just be a return, it might be a reinvention.
I was just making content.
And there you have it, the full career of Sydney Sweeney, from her TV breakthrough to becoming one of the most recognizable faces in Hollywood. Now let me ask you, are you excited for Euphoria Season 3? And what is your favorite Sydney Sweeney performance? Let me know in the comments below and be sure to subscribe for more videos like these. I have been Dean, the average movie guy on your screen. Big thanks for watching. See you next time. Roll the credits.